I want to talk to you about one of the really big lies that RFK Jr. is telling about vaccines and why it is so dangerous for you and your family. For the last 2 months, CDC has pulled way back on its vaccine recommendations for conditions like rotavirus or hepatitis B, which can lead to liver cancer and death. In justifying these decisions, Kennedy has said the federal government conducted what he calls an exhaustive review of policies around the world, and now supposedly we are in line with the international consensus. That is a lie. In reality, vaccine recommendations vary enormously across the world, and while we had been at the high end, now we are at the low end with recommendations that look like the country that Kennedy and his allies say should be our model, which is Denmark. Now, I am a big proponent of learning from abroad, and that includes from places like Denmark, but it is a country with 6 million people living in a social democratic paradise. And if you were truly committed to learning from abroad, you would also look seriously at countries that look more like the United States. An example is France, which demographically, economically resembles the US much more closely than Denmark. It also has a tradition of anti-vaccine sentiment. In fact, until about 10 years ago, they had a much smaller vaccine recommendation list. But the strategy wasn't working there. They saw vaccine levels for diseases like measles fall below herd immunity levels. They saw caseloads rising. So French authorities added 9 vaccines to their list. And the story of one vaccine here is really instructive. It's the vaccine for meningococcal disease, this nightmare that can strike kids, young adults. They're healthy, and then hours later, they're in full body shock. 10 to 15% of the people who get it will die. Many more will live with lifelong impairments and disabilities. Now, initially, the French did not include this vaccine on their new list because it is a very rare condition and they thought it wasn't worth the expense. But then they saw caseloads rise. They had outbreaks. Some children died. And so now they have added the vaccine, which turns out to be the pattern in countries that look like us. Other countries are adding vaccines while we are taking them away. And it is not because we have new data to suggest that these vaccines don't work. They do. It is not because we have new data to suggest these vaccines are unsafe. They're not. It's because RFK Jr. is on a crusade against vaccination. And we are all going to see the consequences when these diseases come roaring back. As always, I don't expect you to take my word for this. You can read all about it in the latest edition of the Breakdown newsletter, which tells the history of what happened in France and also tells one family's tragic story so you can understand what meningococcal disease can do to people. It's the latest edition of the Breakdown newsletter by me, Jonathan Cohn at The Bulwark. I hope you'll read it. I hope you'll think about it. And I hope you'll think about subscribing because we depend on your support to bring you this kind of journalism.